friends, and welcome to another video lesson from DBOS Talks. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of new uploads. This video is part of the playlist called Python tutorial, and here we'll be learning about Python functions. And although we have been seeing a couple of functions in the previous videos, this one is special because you'll be learning how to create your own functions. They're called user-defined functions. Okay, so in the past, in the previous videos, we have seen functions such as these. Okay, the print function, which is built in, and the input function is also built in. So some of those that you have seen again and again. And you don't see the coding of these functions because they are built in. When you install Python, then the functions that are built in are installed together with it. So you don't see them. You just they're just ready to be used by you. Okay. Okay, so here we will be learning how to create our own function. Here goes. So you have two lines of code here. The first one is has the keyword of def, which is, I think it means define, which just means to declare or introduce or create something. So you're defining a function. So the def keyword followed by the function name, whatever name you want to give, except that you should not be using any of the so-called reserved words of Python, which we can talk about it on another video, but just take note. There are keywords or reserved words in Python that are reserved for a special purpose, as being part of a command or being a command itself. So you don't use them as name of an object identifier. So def keyword, the function name, followed by a pair of parentheses, which is used to hold a parameter, sometimes called an argument. Finally, a colon, okay? Just remember that, this is the format. And then below that, after the colon, you will have an indent of, could be a few spaces, where you will start writing your function, the code of your function. In this case, it's just one line of code. This is a print statement using print function. It will print what is enclosed inside the double quotes. This is a string, okay? So, but let's look if I try to run this code, see what happens. Okay, so nothing happens. And why is there no output? To answer the question, take note that a function will not be useful unless you will call it. In IT terms, you will hear of the word invoke. Invoke, I-N-V-O-K-E. So in Python, you create a function, you define it using def, and then you put some program body there. But if there is no calling code or code to invoke it, then it will not run. So now let's invoke a function. Again, to invoke or call a function, you simply write the function name followed by a pair of parentheses. Okay, so now let's run this again. And there you go. So it's run, there's no error, and then it gives you the output of the print function, which is simply the content of the string. This is my first function, okay? So that's, you have created your first user-defined function. And when we know that a function is doing, I'm sorry, the limitation, you see, our function here was defined with no parameter. The parameter, the parentheses is empty. There's no parameter inside of it. So with this kind of style that you do not use a parameter, you are limiting yourself to the capabilities of your function. Your function cannot be dynamic. It can only print one way. If you decide ever to make this message dynamic, changing depending on something, some situation, some customization, it's not possible. The only way to do that is to define a parameter inside of this, minimum one of them, one parameter, okay? So now let's create a function with a single parameter in it, okay? Okay, again, so get familiar with the first line of code, def, the keyword to define a function, followed by the function name. In this case, it's compute annual sal. and then a pair of parentheses. This time there's a parameter inside which I call sal, short for salary. And then we end that line with a colon again, meaning what follows the colon is the program body of the function, okay? But the indent is very, very important. As you can see, there's an indent here, there's an indent here, and that's where the function ends. If you look at this line here, the one with compute annual sal, it is not indented in relation to the def command. They are at the same level. So that means this line of code here is not part of the function, because it's not only those that are indented relative to the function definition are the ones that are in the function body. Okay. So again, let's go back to the function you're defining here. In this second line, you have a mathematical operation going on. You have a variable declaration, a variable called annual underscore sal, and to it you are assigning the result of this mathematical operation. In Python and most other programming languages, this is actually multiplication going on here. In most programming languages, including Python, the operator for multiplication is not x as we do, as what we have grown up with in school, but rather the asterisk. So the asterisk is being used for multiplication, meaning here the value of sal, which is the parameter. Where's that parameter coming from? It's in here in the declaration of the function. So the value of that parameter called sal is being multiplied to 12, which is a constant value. And the result of that is being assigned, because of the equal sign, is being assigned to the variable called annual sal. That's what's going on in this line of code. Okay. And on the third line, we have the familiar looking print command again. And in it, you have a concatenation. Concatenation is something we have discussed in a previous video, joining of strings. So we're joining two string objects. One is the string which reads your annual salary is $, and then concatenated or joined with the string value of annual sal. Okay, so what happens is, because annual sal, because it's getting its value from this operation, it will get a value which is of float type. Float is numeric with decimal values in it. So it's a float, and then you wanna convert it to a string object or string data type prior to a concatenation. Concatenation is a process that involves joining of strings, okay? And then that would work. Okay, so now let's try this. Finally, here is the calling code. Remember, the indent is very important in Python. So these two indented lines of code I am highlighting belong to the function called compute annual sal. That's the meaning of the indent there. While this line of code, which is not indented in relation to this line of code here, meaning this doesn't belong to the function. This is the calling code. Like I mentioned earlier, your function will not become useful unless you call it. So here we're calling that function by its name. And this time we're also passing a parameter. So the parameter sal, here I'm passing 1,500 as a value to the parameter sal. So when I run this, let's see what happens. Okay, so when we run this, what happens is Python will read through your definition of your function, and then it gets to the calling code, and then it will pass 1,500 to sal. Sal is here. So sal is here. 1,500 times 12 is 18,000. And then it gets passed or assigned to the variable called annual sal, okay, which becomes a data of float type. Float is a numeric type with decimal values in it. So annual sal is, remember, in float type, numeric value with decimal values. Now it's getting converted by this function into a string object, into a string type of object. And concatenation is happening because of the plus concatenation character, which we have discussed in a previous video. So the print command will now string together this bunch of words in here and character, and the string value, converted value of 18,000. And this is what you get. Your annual salary is $18,000 or $18,000. Okay. I hope you get the flow and get a little bit familiar, comfortable with the syntax and how things are going on in this very short code. Let me just, okay. Now, so for the above code, I'll make the following changes. Do not take note that a function can also return a value, and that's with the help of the return keyword. We can use the keyword return in a function. So for the above code, I'll make the following changes. Instead of my print statement, I will be using the return keyword, followed by the concatenated string that I want to display. Let me just get that bunch snippet, that code snippet, and then paste it here for your convenience. So it looks very much similar, but in this line of code here, instead of the print command, I use the return keyword, return command. Okay, and yeah, that's the basic difference I'm introducing to this one. Now let's see what happens. You can see that the output is the same. I'm just showing you that you can also use the return keyword in a function. Remember that in a function, and sequence is actually very important in Python. In most programming languages, sequence is very important. So why am I saying that? Because look at this. You do not, first you define a function and then you call it. Okay? Let me cut it. First you define a function, but if you run it on its own, there will be nothing there because there's nothing calling it. So you add a code to invoke it, to call it. This is the one. And it works, you've seen it. If we reverse it, I will show you. You will see. I'm running, nothing is happening. Why? That's because I'm calling a function that's still non-existent. It hasn't been declared yet. I'm calling a function which hasn't been defined yet. So sequence is very important in most programming languages. Okay, so what you do is you define the function first and then you call it. Okay. Finally, if you want the salary to be something entered by a user, we again use the input function. Note that I will make, okay, you can see, I will do something that will cause something to happen. Okay. Cut this out, put this in. So I will enter something like 1,500. Why? There's no error, but look at the salary. Your annual salary is $1,500, 1,500. Is this correct? There's something wrong. There's something wrong here. Something weird, right? So I intentionally did that so you can also see the one of the things you can avoid while trying to learn Python. Okay, so the question is, why is the output such a huge value, so exaggerated? I'm just trying to get the annual salary of 1,500. It should be as an easy 1,500 times 12. Okay, so it's 18,000, as we know from a previous demonstration. But why is it so big like this one? So what happens is the input from the user is being taken. You see, the user entered 1,500. It looks numeric. It looks a number, like a number, but in fact, it is being accepted as a string value. Okay, if you don't know strings, let's go back and watch my very first video. Start from there, and then you can have an understanding of what things are, the data types and such. So it looks like a number, this value being entered by the user, but in reality, it's a string. So what happens is, it must be converted to a float in order to process that value correctly once it gets here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I will correct a line of code, the one with the monthly sal here. So I'll add the float function in here. Yeah, float. Because what is being entered by the user is being accepted as a string value, string data type. And then so this is like not like this is a converter. This function will convert the type from string to float. Float is a numeric data type with decimal values. Okay, so now let's run that again. 1500. Okay, that's much better. So it's not the one with the erroneous super long string, right? So now you have 80,000, but the odd thing here is that you have a decimal value of zero, a single zero. In the normal, you would probably see this being printed out or handwritten with 2 decimal places, isn't it? So why is it like this? Okay, so the result could have been a simple whole number, or if we with decimal values, it should have been 2 decimal values at least, or at most. Okay, so before we try to fix that, let's try entering a monthly salary that will also that will return a non-zero decimal value. Okay, so let me just do it again. I will enter 1500.23 to produce a value with non-zero decimal values. Okay, now you have a different problem. You don't like this because it's not standard. You don't see it in a receipt. You don't see this in your payslip. You don't see it anywhere in an official document, financial document, financial report. It doesn't look good. Okay, although it's so precise. So what do? We will do something. Okay. We see that the output is like that. If we want to display only 2 decimal values, let me paste the edited code, which wherein I have also added my comments. With I prepared some code. Sorry, give me that. Give me that. Okay, cut it out, put it there. So I added this line of code here. These are comments. If you remember from previous videos, this hash is the beginning of a comment. Comment will be ignored by Python. It will not be executed. It's more for information of the one reading it. Or it could be used to cut out a piece of the code so that it doesn't run. Okay, so I added this line. I introduced a new variable called annual sal formatted. And then you have this cryptic formatting here. We can discuss in some other video later on because this will eat my time here. And dot format annual sal. So it's basically formatting annual sal to have a limit of 2 decimal places. F is float. Okay, and then I edited this. I use a return statement, blah, blah, blah. And here I am concatenating the string with the formatted value, which I have passed to a variable called annual sal, FMTD, annual sal formatted. Okay, let me just run it. And then 1500.23 to cause it to have a non-zero decimal value. And there you go. So it fixed the, before our problem was much worse. It had a repeating bunch of text which doesn't make sense. Next, we had a single zero decimal value. And then we have non-zero decimal values, but it was a lot of decimal values, more than 10 maybe. So this one with this formatting going on here, it fixed our problems. Okay, so there you go, and you have learned a couple of things here, even though we are just building a short user-defined function. You were able to learn a couple of things, and as well as things that you can avoid, and as well as things you can do if you hit some bump on the road. Okay, so thank you for watching.